Thank you. Okay. And it starts in Matthew 13 and verse 1. In verse 4, it says, and he, this man in this, I guess let's start in verse 3. He told them many things in parables, saying, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil. And immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched. Since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them out. And other seeds fell on good soil and produced fruit. And that's what we want, the good soil. And then you come down to verse 18, where Jesus explains the parable of the sower. And he says in verse 19, the seed that fell on the hard ground that didn't sink in at all. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. In verse 20, pay special attention here to verse 20. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while. And when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. Next to that, you might make a reference. There's this parable is also in Mark and Luke. In Luke, I think Luke is helpful. In Luke 8 and verse 13, on the rocky soil, it says, when they believe for a while, they believe for a while, and in time of testing, they fall away. So, I thought this was a study of Hebrews. Why am I starting with the parable of the sower? Because the book of Hebrews is about that rocky soil. If you can I think it's the clearest and best picture about what's happening to the audience of the book of Hebrews and why this, I'm going to call it a letter a lot. Probably it's a sermon. It's a written down sermon that was preached, but I'm just going to call it a letter. But the point of this sermon is, here are a group of Christians who have received the word. They are Christians and good, like they've done what they're supposed to do. But because of suffering that has happened to them on account of the word, because of their commitment to Christ, they are suffering for it, and now they're on the brink of falling away. And so, I'll throw this up here. This is my key verse. Hebrews 10:23. We'll see this for a minute. But if there's going to be like a title for this class, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. Hold fast. But this is Hebrews. Hebrews was written to Christians who were on the verge of falling away because they were suffering for their faith. I think that might be the most important thing you need to know and keep in mind as we move throughout this study. So I'm going to get started here in just a second. I'll open up with some comments if you have anything that you want to say before I get rolling. Just questions or thoughts overall about the book of Hebrews. But before I give you a spot, let me just say this. A lot of people have said this, and I think that it's reasonable. As you read through Hebrews, it's reasonable to think that this is a case. That the audience of Hebrews are Jews who became Christians, who for whatever reason are slipping back into their former Jewish life. And the Hebrew letter is saying to that group of people, no, don't slip back into your former Hebrew Jewish life because Jesus is better. And that's true. That's true. But I think what's more important, and you'll see this in just a second, what's more important is why are they slipping back or tempted to slip back into their former Hebrew Jewish life? And it's because they were suffering and they were on the verge of falling away and drifting back into what they had previously known and previously been. Also, it's probably the Jews who are giving them a hard time. So the easiest way to turn the suffering off is to give the Jews what they want and just be Jews again. But that's not the key. The key is they are suffering for their faith and on the verge of leaving Jesus because of that. If you want to say this, Hebrews is saying to a group of people, don't quit. Don't be a quitter. And it's not even don't be a quitter. It's don't quit because things got hard. That's the main thing. Like, I'm not just being like, hey, don't be a quitter. Your life is legitimately difficult right now because you're a Christian. We'll see a couple examples of this later. And I'm saying, I know it's hard, but don't quit. That's the most important thing you need to know about this study as we move forward. Anything you want to say before we begin? Any thoughts about Hebrews, questions that you have, general, like what are we going to be doing here?
Is the pressure coming from the Jews or is it coming from the Roman world? Do we know that or is it just a guess?
Yeah, no, I think that we're going to, you might have to answer that yourself in just a minute when we get to chapter 10, but I think we can make a case that it's the Jews. Because, first of all, we've got tons of evidence that that's exactly what was happening through the book of Acts, that everywhere Christianity went, the Jews were mad about people leaving what they thought should be the faith, and they just persecuted. And even when it was the local governments that persecuted the Christians, it was because the Jews stirred them up. And so we're going to kind of stick with that, I think. That's a good question, though. Anything else before we get started? Okay. Let me show you the first thing that I'm going to do here. Larry, you're going to appreciate this point. We'll see. Here's my marking system. I really would like, I'm not saying that you have to do what I do. That's not what this is. But I'm going to talk about this because if we all use a common language, then it's easier to communicate and think in the same way. Orange is sections. So as we look throughout Hebrews, we're going to be marking sections. If you have your journals, I don't think Becky has a Hebrews journal because she's not going to be up here. But if you have your journals or if you have a printout, you want to write stuff in there. If you use your colors, I use orange for sections, and we'll be dividing those sections up. Purple is subsections, so Jesus is better than the angels is chapters 1 and 2, and we'll divide that up into a couple different subsections. Subpoints, that's purple. Yellow is the main point. Green is good, red is bad, and blue is pay attention to words. Teal, the teal pen, is how you see that this is a reference to an Old Testament passage, which is going to be very important in Hebrews because Hebrews draws a lot on the Old Testament. So you do that. And then brown in the Old Testament especially, Jay gave me brown. I was like, I got this brown pen. What am I going to do with it? Or a brown highlighter. And Jay said, make a little brown cross because the cross is wood and brown and it points to Jesus. And it's like, so it made it into my chart here. Here's the reason why I'm showing you this now. Remember this. Themes, purple. Themes and subsections is purple. Yellow is main point. If you want to mark this and go through this. Number one. I don't want to just read through these. I want, if you would like to do this as we move through Hebrews, I would like to give you an opportunity to mark it so that you can remember it and reproduce it for other people. That's the goal. So the question, this is where you'll appreciate Larry. The question is, how are you going to mark this? Because what I did in my Bible, Larry likes it when I do this. He's going through some of my videos. He likes it when I say, this is how I mark it in my Bible. And then he marks it in the Bible. And a couple minutes later I say, oh, never mind, I'm doing this instead. And he's like, I just put that in my Bible. It's his favorite thing when I do that. So these verses, what I did, this is like the theme that runs through Hebrews. That's why I did purple. So I took my purple highlighter and I just highlighted the verse, or I put a little dot next to the verse to move through the book of Hebrews. However, if I had a highlighter eraser, or I was going to do this in a new Bible, I might do it with yellow, because rather than being a theme, this is the main point. So you'll have to figure out how you want to mark it. That's about the only introduction to marking that I plan on doing in this class. We'll see. Number 1, what? What's happening in the book of Hebrews? And the message is, don't fall away. That's the what. I told you it's the most important thing that you need to know about this book. I wish if I was like the kind of person who did something like this, I would take like a paper, a poster. I'd have a poster printed out and I would tape it somewhere on the wall for the next 3 months, because in every single passage and in every single class, as we move through Hebrews, I'm going to be pointing us back to this what over and over again. How does this relate to the main point about not falling away? Remember this thing, the point of Hebrews, don't fall away. And the question is, the main word here is focus. Focus on this again and again and again. Don't fall away. So let's read some of these. This is not a full list. This is just the list that is the easiest to see, but you're going to see this everywhere, on every single page of Hebrews. Chapter 2 and verse 1. Therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. The point here is, don't drift away from the message that we heard about Jesus. Chapter 3 and 12, 13, and 14. So I have the purple. Like I'm doing a theme here. Purple, purple, purple. 12, 13, and 14. I think yellow might be probably more appropriate because it's the main point, not just a theme. 12, 13, and 14. Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. But exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. For we have come to share in Christ if we hold our original confidence firm to the end. Don't let go. Don't fall away. Chapter 4 and verse 1. Therefore, while the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us fear lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. There's still a promise, and you don't want to fail to reach that promise. In verse 11, let us therefore strive to enter that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience, just like the wandering generation in Exodus and mostly Numbers. Exodus and Numbers. Just like they grumbled in the wilderness and God said, you are not going into the promised land. The Hebrew writer says, if you act like them, you're not going into the promised land either. You don't want to fail to enter into the promised rest. Verse 14. Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heaven, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. Don't let go. Chapter 6, starting in verse 4. For it is impossible in the case of those who have once been enlightened, who have tasted the heavenly gift, and have shared in the Holy Spirit, and have tasted the goodness of the Word of God and the powers of the age to come, and then have fallen away, to restore them again to repentance, since they are crucifying once again the Son of God to their own harm and holding him up to contempt. You got that? It is impossible when someone has fallen away to restore them again to repentance, since they are crucifying once again the Son of God. So don't do that. Don't fall away. That's our main point, our main theme. Verses 11 and 12. We desire each one of you to show the same earnestness, to have the full assurance of hope until the end, so that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promise. Have patience. Make it all the way to the end of the road. Chapter 10. See how I have a star next to 10 in verse 19? Here's the reason why I have that star there. You don't need to worry about writing this now, because we'll look at it as we move through the book of Hebrews. But Hebrews is basically divided up into two main sections. The first, chapter 1 through 10:18, is the argument. I'm making my case. And then you get to 10:19, and in 10:19, that's where the Hebrew writer is going to transition, and he's going to say, well, look at verse 19. He says, therefore, based upon the case that I just made for the last 10 chapters, based upon that, this is how you're supposed to live. And so 10:19 through the end of the book is more of a practical section, which is kind of a theme. You see that same pattern throughout the New Testament. But when you start in 10:19, the main practical section, look at verse 23. We're in the main practical section, and this is it. This is like the main practical point. Verse 23. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Hold fast. Don't fall. Don't quit. Then you get to verse 32. This is the longest one I'm going to read this morning. I'm going to read 32 through the end of the chapter, because this is all the message. Like, this is the main practical point. Recall the former days when, also, Ryan, here you go. This might be what's happening to this group of Christians. Recall the former days when, after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and sometimes being partners with those so treated. For you had compassion on those in prison. Some of these Christians are being thrown in jail. You had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property. They're having their stuff taken away because they're Christians. You joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. For yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay, but my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. Don't shrink back. And this is, remember, Chuck, I was pointing at you earlier. It's not just don't shrink back. I don't think this is in the parable of the sower where the thorns grow up and it's the cares of the world that's choking out your faith. I think it's the rock. It's the rocky soil. It's that they're suffering. And so in this sense, we can have some sympathy for this group of people. Like, it's hard. What they're doing is hard. But the Hebrew letter is saying, don't you quit. Don't fall away because this is hard. I'm almost done. Chapter 11. Is the Faith Hall of Fame. And the Faith Hall of Fame is not just really neat. It's listed for a reason. Almost every single one, I think every single one of these except for maybe 2. Every single one of these faced death. Death is the theme throughout the Faith Hall of Fame. And we'll spend a lot of time pointing that out and looking at it whenever we get there. But the point of the Faith Hall of Fame is to say, hey, look, you are not the only person who has suffered for your faith. And you're not the only person who has died without what seems to be reaching the goal. Lots of other people have done this. And so the theme is, let's do what they did. And then you get to chapter 12, and Jesus is the main picture of that. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. Okay. That's number 1. What is Hebrews? It is encouragement, a lesson to not fall away. And I can't emphasize it enough. Focus is our key word. We're going to focus on that message over and over and over again. Is there anything you want to say now? I don't have many stopping places in this morning's lesson, so this is a stopping place. Questions, comments, anything you want to say about that? I know that there's going to be lots of practical stuff in this, but this is the reason why I'm so excited about this lesson. Over the last couple, when I say the last couple years, like I'm probably referring to 20 years or so. I've taught Hebrews several times, and this is younger Ryan. Younger Ryan read all of the commentaries and learned all of the stuff with Hebrews. And I'm really glad that I did that. I don't regret any of it. But I'm not going to stand up here and try and focus on all of the difficult, hard things that pop up in the book of Hebrews. I'm going to focus more on the main point. Why did God give us this book? What is God saying to us in this book? And the message is, don't quit. Don't fall away. Don't you stop. Even, this is the most important part of this. Even when it's hard. So I was thinking, I have a couple points of references for something like this. But in my life, and especially in my work with this congregation, there are a handful of people, and I'm going to say, I'm working on some Ellisville history stuff right now, so it's even more in my mind. So I'm going to say it, because I think those of us who have not been around for very long, who don't know this stuff, you should know this stuff. There's a handful of people here, like, let's go around the room. You got the Suitors, the Smiths. I know I'm going to miss someone, and I'm sorry when that happens. The Scarboroughs, the Aileys, the Kyles. There are a handful of people here in this congregation who have done some really, really, really hard stuff. And when other people quit, they didn't. I think that's something worth paying attention to and remembering. As we move through this book and we see this message, don't quit. Not saying that nobody else has done any hard stuff. I'm just saying that's one of the things, like the main point. Don't give up. Do you have something or no? Anything you want to say about number one? I'm ready to leave number one, I think. Anything about number one? Okay. Don't quit. Don't give up. Don't fall away. Number two. Number two is the why. Number one is the what. What is Hebrews? Don't quit. Number two is the why. Let me ask you this question for those of you who are maybe already familiar with Hebrews. What is the argument and the reason? I've got two listed. There's probably more than two, but I've got two listed here. What is the why? Don't quit. Why in Hebrews? Why don't quit? What's the reason? Like, what's the main argument here? It's not just, hey, don't quit. It's don't quit, and this is the reason why.
Because now with Jesus, we're in like the end-all, be-all fulfillment of everything God's done. And so if they should have continued on in the Old Testament, how much more should you continue on now?
Yes, because of Jesus. I'll throw this up here, but Adams is, when you made your comment, I was thinking, oh man, there's this positive motivation that we have because of who Jesus is and what Jesus has done. And that's right. I kind of wish that I had put my slide big enough to cover those three lines. Jesus. Like, that's the why. That's the why. And so, I'm not actually gonna introduce this section here because this is the bulk of what we're going to be doing in Hebrews, and so it would be difficult to go through and read all of the different passages, but I can at least give you an overview here. We are going to be highlighting Jesus as the main motivation and the main reason to not quit and to not fall away. And I have on the bottom here, I'm sure I'm going to say this 1,000 times in this class. The book of Hebrews, the sermon, the letter of Hebrews, does not say these words, but it's implied in every single argument. And the implication is, have you lost your mind? I probably need to get a picture of Stanley from The Office with a quote. Have you lost your mind? That's the main point of Hebrews. When you look at Jesus and you see who Jesus is and you understand what Jesus has done, you have completely lost your mind if you think that it's the right course of action to walk away from him, to quit and to step away. And so in chapters 1 and 2, we're going to do this thing. Hey, angels. Angels are pretty cool. Like, angels are a pretty big deal. Heavenly beings, angels. The Hebrew writer is going to say, Jesus is better than the angels. We're going to talk about Moses and the old law. Hey, Moses is a pretty big deal. Jesus is better than Moses. What Jesus has accomplished and what Jesus has built is way better than what Moses accomplished and better than what Moses built. There's a fun implication in that section when we get to chapters 3 and 4. The Hebrew writer is not going to say this directly, but he's going to remind us that not even Moses got to enter into the promised land. Like, you're going to follow Moses and make a big deal out of Moses? Have you lost your mind to walk away from Jesus? He's better than Moses in every way.
But that's the thing. If you're not holding on to Jesus, you will lose your mind. And everything else will follow. And that's what the devil is after. He's after our minds. It
Yeah.
all is up here.
Yeah. And so that's kind of my main focus on this whole thing is going to be, don't fall away. Why? Because of Jesus. And so our task, as we read through Hebrews, is going to be to understand the arguments. You did this, and you're right. I'm not disagreeing with you on this, but I think you'll know what I'm saying here. You did this. Our task is to understand the arguments and to know who Jesus is and to know what Jesus did, I would do this. Our task is to understand Jesus and know who he is and what he did. Because this is different from this.
Well, yeah, because the devil has his own set of arguments. That
Yeah.
He's going to try to pull you into, to pull you away from the Lord.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We want to and that's the way to prevent quitting and falling away, is to feel that deeply in your soul, to understand who Jesus is and to feel that. And so we're going to try and do that in this class. The key word for this one is understand. We're going to try to feel and understand Jesus as a prevention method from falling and quitting. Henry?
I think the book itself is also for us to remain steadfast in the faith.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And also, we as Christians, we're going to be facing challenges. And the important thing we have to do is to encourage ourselves as well as others to hold on fast to what is written.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, and maybe the hard thing is already happening in your life right now. And this is a message that's practical and real for you. But for the rest of us, maybe the hard thing is not right now, but we know that it's coming. Like, we know that there's going to be some difficult circumstance in life. And we also know, because we've watched other people fail that test again and again. So how do we brace ourselves for the whole hard times so that we don't quit whenever those difficult times comes? That's the key for this book of Hebrews. It's not, here's what this word means. It's to understand the message. So, let me finish my thing. Jesus is better than the angels. Jesus is better than Moses. Then we're going to go to the covenant. Like, Jesus is better in every way with the covenant. He has a better covenant. In the Old Testament, there was a tabernacle. Jesus is in heaven. He has a better place. In the Old Testament, there was sacrifices. Jesus is a better sacrifice. In every way, Jesus is better. And so the main argument is going to be, have you lost your mind to think that this is a good and appropriate thing to do, to quit and give up? No, it's not. Consider Jesus. Anything you want to say about that one? There's also a negative argument. The negative argument is, if you quit, you will bring God's wrath upon yourself. I'm sure that each one of these probably speaks to some of us differently. Let's do 1026. I'll only do one for the sake of time. Ten 26 through 31. For if we go on sinning deliberately after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. But so what can you expect if you quit? A fearful expectation of judgment and a fury of fire that will consume the adversaries. Anyone who has set aside the law of Moses dies without mercy on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much worse the punishment, do you think, will be deserved by the one who has trampled underfoot the Son of God and has profaned the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified and has outraged the Spirit of grace? So in Hebrews, we're going to see this word better over and over again. The positive is Jesus is better, Jesus is better, Jesus is better. But there's also this negative argument, which is, how many of us read the Old Testament and we read some of the punishments of crimes in the Old Testament and you go, ooh. Like, if somebody does something, stone that person to death. The community stones them to death. Put that person to death. There are a couple times in the Old Testament you read stuff like that and we're like, ugh. And the Hebrew writer is saying, you think that's bad? How bad do you think it's going to be to turn away from Jesus? So, don't quit. That's our focus. Because of Jesus, that's the argument. I think this is some of the hardest part of Hebrews. This is where we're going to need to spend our time, is just being able to understand and articulate what the argument is. And so my goal is for every single person of every spiritual maturity level in this congregation. As we go through these arguments, my goal in this class is that every single person will understand the argument. That you will be able to say, oh, hey, I see what God is telling me here through this. Anything on that one?
In light of what you just said about the focus for this class throughout, can you just touch on next Sunday, Don Truex will be here, and some of the things that he's going to be talking about fit right in with the same idea?
Yes. So Don's, yes, good one. Don's a promotion too. I wish I had the slide. If we were in marketing industry, I would be like, nice transition, flashy sign with the gospel meeting, right? I'm not. Don's lessons, I'm really excited about Don's lessons because Don is going to be talking about every season of life. And what he's doing, we talked a lot, leading up to this series, we talked a lot about what is this congregation, where are we, what do we need in all of this, and how can Don bring what he has to supplement, help with some of that. And so Don's going to be talking to every season. And so younger kids, younger people with younger kids, middle-aged people, older people in a different stage of life. And then we're also going to be talking about like what stage we are in as a church, like where we are as a congregation. So Mark, I don't know if this is what you're thinking, but this is what your comment made me think of. The message is the same message for every person in the room, but every person in the room is in a different place. Like we need to find a way to tailor it to don't fall away because you're suffering right now in this way. So yeah, good. Come next week. Friday. Starts Friday. Number 3. This is last. What? Don't fall away. That's our focus. Why? Because of Jesus. That's our argument. We're going to understand the argument. The how is we're going to look at some of the practical how-tos. Okay, cool. You know, Adam said this thing. What's the argument? Don't fall away. And Adam said, because of Jesus. And so I'm going to take what Adam said and I'm going to give it to Luke. Luke, don't fall away because of Jesus. And Luke is like, what do you want me to do with that? Like, because of Jesus. I say this all the time, and I mean this. Like, when you look at the broken world right now, the solution to our problems is not the next election or political leaders. The solution to all of our problems is Jesus. And that's true and that's right, but it needs some explanation. And so the Hebrew writer is going to give us a couple explanations of how Jesus is the answer to this problem. The first one that we're going to look at is Jesus' presence, not the first one that we're going to look at. You see, this is all through the book. The first focus that we're going to see is Jesus is with you. Like, you are walking through this fire and you're suffering, and what you need to know is that you're not doing it by yourself. Jesus is with you. That's going to be a huge emphasis throughout this letter to the Hebrews, that Jesus is with you. And there's one section that I really like. He calls you brother. We call him Lord. He calls you brother. Jesus is with us. That's something that should mean something to us. When we understand it and see it, it should mean something and drive us and motivate us. Number 2, we're here to help each other. That's one of the things when we looked at chapter 10 and verses 23 to 25. We read it just a minute ago. Don't neglect the assembling of the saints. The worst possible thing that you can do when you're in the fire is walk away from your support network. That's the worst possible decision that you can make. And so there's 2 parts of that. The one is going to be, don't make this stupid, horrible, awful mistake. But number 2 is going to be, hey, we have work to do. We got a brother, you're just in front of me. We got a brother who's walking through the fire right now. He's really suffering. And one of the answers to not falling away is me. I'm with you. Jesus is with you, but so am I. And so are we. That's going to be a major thrust throughout this study. So here you go. This is a summary of what we did today and also what we're going to do in every single class. Every single class we're going to do this. I am laser focused and zoomed in on this thing. Don't fall away. We just read, if you want to prepare for next Sunday morning, Hebrews 1 verses 1 through 3. Just be ready to talk about that. And this is going to be the way, like you say, okay, cool, like I read Hebrews 1 verses 1 and 3. But you read it and you say, how do these 3 verses talk to me about not falling away? How do these 3 verses make an argument about who Jesus is so that I don't quit? What do these 3 verses tell me to do practically? What am I supposed to do with the information in these next 3 verses? And so that's what this is going to be our outline for Hebrews 3 verses 1 through 3. No, I said next Sunday morning. It's going to be Wednesday. On Wednesday, that's what we're going to do. And then we'll take a break for dawn. Do you have any comments or questions? Or any thoughts about Hebrews generally? Like, this is a good place to be like, hey, one time I read Hebrews and I really liked that. You can do that now. Nothing? Okay, well, that's where we're headed. Thanks for listening to me today.